that no audited financials were ever prepared and laid in this House of Parliament. So if you want to talk about maladministration or bad administration, perhaps he should explain to this country why during his tenure that the financial statements were never prepared and never laid. No systems, no processes and procedures were in place at the BTMI. So if he wants to say that, let him say it. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, is that the Barbados Labour Party came to office. I wasn't the minister. The Honourable Member for St. James Central was the minister, and he can tell you that they had to start and move with alacrity in order to complete the financials for that entity. And I am proud to say that those financials were submitted and will sure obviously be laid in Parliament. We did that when we came to office. The other issue in respect of the BTMI is that they would not tell you, but I will tell the country, that it was underfunded, okay, as an SOE, and you know how critical the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. is to us as a marketer of the destination. No funding. The Barbados Labour Party came to office, and by way of an airport service charge, put the BTMI on a sustained funding. Again, other members will know, and for sure the former member, the former tourism minister, who represents the constituency, Michael, St. James Central, would tell you that when they went to World Travel Market, the first question was, when are you going to pay your bills? The airlines and the operators were asking that question. Today, I can proudly say, as a member of the Barbados Labour Party, that when you go to WTM, nobody's asking about when you are going to settle debts that are overdue. They actually commend you and want to come and do business with you, because this Barbados Labour Party put the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. on a sustainable funding path. And we are even going further, as I alluded to during my estimates, that we are going to transition to a private PPP arrangement in order to facilitate this. So I think, Mr. Chairman, there will come a time when I will have an opportunity to respond to those who believe that they ought that believe that they want to trouble me. And there are some people who believe that, you know, I should be troubled. But I remember a former prime minister once made the point that if your humbug may can trouble you, I may get a drop cake. Not that I would do that to you, Mr. Chairman. That comment is not intended for you. But I say this because an opportunity will come when we are going to have to tell the country what we inherited at the Ministry of Tourism, what we have done to put this country on a sustainable tourism path, and that time will come shortly. I'm obliged, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for that response. It seems that I am also now baffled by the question that was, or the statement made in the newspaper. But I think based on your question, it begs me now to ask a question that wasn't on my agenda, which is in relation to BTMI, and I think maybe the LESC, and I think maybe one other. You said you've put tourism on a sustainable path, and I know that there are some entities that are now off government budget. Could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Sure, thank you. And I believe Ms. Charmaine London is here with us as well. Yes, you're correct, Honourable Member. We have put the Barbados Conference Services Limited on a sustainable path. And if you will know, in the estimates, we don't request as a ministry any funding for that organization. The organization has done a phenomenal job in seeking out new business. There is also an arrangement with Ross University there that also brings in some income. They've been able to maintain their staff, but they're actively doing a number of, pursuing a number of initiatives in order to build out extra revenue. And there's no cash call or requirement on the part of the government of Barbados, certainly since we came to office in 2018. But I will ask the head of the Barbados Conference Services Limited to add to what I've said. Ms. London.
Good morning. Good morning, all. My name is Charmaine London. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Barbados Conference Services Limited, and we manage the Lord Erskine Sandiford Center. To add to the Minister's comment, we have done a number of initiatives. We have been, number one, for sure, what we've been doing is working collaboratively We've been working collaboratively with our industry partners and event producers to produce our own events, because we really cannot only depend on booking events, short-term events with our local persons as well as local clients as well as our overseas clients. What we're also doing is working with BTMI and the Product Club from BHTA to encourage and to attract more MICE business, which is the meetings, incentives, conferences, and events business. That's a niche market, which we would like to see, I would like to see grow more over the next couple of years. Only last year we would have joined with the BTA and the BHTA to go to the IMETS America's meeting to promote LESC and promote the island along with BTMI and the BHTA. The other things that we're doing, we refocus our efforts in our event management services. Not only do we manage events at the center, but a lot of persons do not know that we also manage events at other local venues. And one of the main things that we're looking to grow as well is the audiovisual and technical services which we offer to all the venues on island, as well as off island. We have a portable system. I think most members might know. We have a portable system which is a conference discussion system similar to what we have here, but we have used that along with our technical support and our very highly trained technical persons to offer that service and to meetings not only here on island, at Hilton or all the other venues, but also in Dominica, Antigua, and St. Lucia so far. And that is we have diversified in a way so that we can increase our revenues. In addition to that, we are also completing infrastructural upgrades as well as the physical plant. The physical plant is over 25 years, and there are some areas which need to be upgraded to modernize it, as well as to make it more aesthetically pleasing, and also to meet the trends and international standards. And we have started doing that. So far we have completed the recarpeting of the main conference rooms. We are going to continue to complete the smaller rooms. We are also looking at our furnishings to replace those so that we become more marketable. And those are things that we are working on at the present moment. One of the main areas we're also going to be working on is the renovation and the upgrade of the washroom facilities throughout the center. So that is what is one of the projects that we'll be working on over the next 2 years. And one of the things that we've also tried to do is to reduce our footprint, our carbon footprint. Today, we do have a photovoltaic system in place which has saved us roughly about 7% on the electricity bill, and our electricity bill is the highest operating expense that we have at this present moment. So we have been able to reduce that by 7%. We are investigating installing another photovoltaic system, an additional system, and this will go on the multi-story car park. That multi-story car park already has the facility, the infrastructure to attach a photovoltaic system to there. So we are investigating that so that we will be able to reduce our electricity costs as well as to reduce the carbon footprint. We are also looking at upgrading our chilled water air conditioning system to a more efficient energy technology, also to provide additional redundancy and to mitigate any downtimes caused by the aging air conditioning plant. And the final thing, in terms of energy efficiency, we are investigating a power factor correction unit, which will further reduce our costs again by about 12%. So what we're doing is looking to increase our revenue, but at the same time reducing our costs, and so that we are not a burden to the government purse. Once we do that, we will obviously not reduce our or how should I put it? We will not compromise our service to our clients. Thank you.
Your final question, sir.
All right. Thank you, Honourable Member, and thank you to Madam. My final question is in relation to sustainable tourism. And I know we've heard the word used at different points during the course of this conversation. They need to focus on sustainability, they need to focus on vulnerabilities, and so on. And my question is really then in relation to ecotourism as a product. And considering that the East Coast remains, and other parts of Barbados, but the East Coast specifically, remains untapped in many ways. It is rugged, it is rustic. It offers the opportunity for a great ecotourism product. We see places like Walker's World, Cornwall Cottage, and other places that are venturing into this, but as a part of the overall tourism package. I am not so sure what role this plays, how big this factors in as an opportunity that is perhaps underdeveloped. And I would like to know what plans, if any, there are for utilizing the potential for an ecotourism product in Barbados.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I would have alluded to some of it, not under that specific category when I spoke, but when I spoke to the issue of attractions and, of course, what we can do to, for example, our gullies that we have in Barbados, using that as one example of what we can do, not only to build sustainability and resilience, but in terms of the tourism sector as a sustainable entity, and also in addition to all the policies that we would announce in terms of our smart energy programs, in terms of all the net zero arrangements that we want to achieve, the fact that we had used the BEST program to enhance greening and sustainability and obviously seek to go after renewable energy. What I will do, I will ask the BTMI to address this issue as well. We also have the chair of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., Mrs. Shelley Williams, with us. I'll let her speak to it, and of course, the CEO of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., Mr. Ian Strayhart. Chairman?
Thank you, Minister. When I think about sustainability, I don't only, I just left from...
Before you move on, you give your name and your position.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. My name is Shelley Williams. I am the chair of BTMI. My apologies. When I think about sustainability, when in terms of tourism, I think a little bit more than just eco. I think about how our Barbadians can make tourism more sustainable for us, and how can tourism feed into sustaining our economic, how we sustain our economy through tourism as well. I just came off of a trip meeting the Italians and European tour operators, and they took great interest into Barbados because they're seeing us as a very sustainable destination. I told them sustainability is something that is seemingly a buzzword for the wider world, but for Barbadians, we live in a sustainable manner. You look at how we grow things, how we eat, are the same ecotourism you're talking about, the same locations, the Harrison's Cave, which was pretty much preserved by the persons in St. Thomas. How we feed into tourism and make it more sustainable. We at the BTMI are very, very interested in doing that. That is big on our list. We have Run Barbados. We moved Run Barbados from in town to go on to Bashiba, so people can see the beauty of Barbados. And you're seeing now sustainability, meaning we are now taking our rum shops. If you saw a lot of the films going around now, you're seeing the new marketing of tourism is no longer just a Caucasian tourist walking down a beach front. It is now going into the rum shops and showing you the average Barbadian and how they live and how they share in the tourism product. If you see what we're doing in terms of promoting our water from the sky, we're now brokering with the cruise ships to have that on board, and they're buying that on board now, and that was brokered out of tourism. So sustainability for me in tourism means that all Barbadians must be included into this product. And the well, we have to take care of our country, but there's more to tourism just than the hotels. And we definitely, we are definitely actively looking for new attractions and diverse places that we can carry our tourists. And they're asking for it. I would like to see the day that we even have the Temple Yard, the Rastafarian community feeding into our tourism product as well. When we fix up and make them look like oysters, we will have yet another attraction. So those are the things I'm talking about when it comes to sustainable tourism for the tourism product. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before Dr. Trenhart comes, I would like to ask my Permanent Secretary also to make some additional comments here. P.S.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Francine Blackman, Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport. I basically wish to add to the Chair, Ms. Williams, by indicating that in terms of the ecotourism, we recently the ministry was able to have a very credible partner within the IDB produce a report that basically spoke to this. That report shed light on what additional initiatives that we can take to further ecotourism. One of it, which is, these are areas that have been talked about before, is how do we further expand and develop our gullies to become a major attraction for tourists. And one area that was paid particular attention was the Wim Gully in St. Peter. And how do we facilitate a whole ecosystem there that allows for persons to do selling of particular craft items along there, also to connect that with boating and to develop it in a manner that persons from within the area benefit from that particular beauty and nature that we do have in the gullies around Barbados. These are things that have been talked about for some time, but now we are taking a more direct approach within the ministry as to how we can build out these additional gullies around Barbados. We have Jackson Gully. There's talked about how can we build that out where you can have very short visits from persons coming off the cruise ships to just go there, bus them there, that they can experience that wonder of nature too as well. So these are some of the initiatives right now that are being considered within the ministry and will be built out over time. Thank you.
Dr. Trenhart, I'm not sure if you want to add any further comments.
Thank you, Minister. Jens Trenhart, CEO BTMI. So for us, sustainable tourism is really around how we manage the destination. And it's important because the impact of a well-managed tourism destination can provide essential benefits. On the other side, poor management can also have severe impacts on the ecosystem, the economic stability, and overconsumption as well of resources that can contribute to the loss of cultural integrity and identity of the destination. So for us, sustainability is a multi-dimensional topic. So it does not only provide considerations to preserve our environment, but also includes the protection of social structures in our communities and the Bajan culture. Because, what post-pandemic travelers are looking for is more meaningful travel and experiences that include and drive purpose in their trips and want to have that immersive contact with local experiences and communities. So I believe it goes beyond just ecotourism. So our goal needs to be to develop Barbados in a sustainable destination, which means working with the hotels, the residents, the communities, and the government together collaboratively. And that strategy is then to boost really the island's tourism product, make it more authentic, and eventually roping in thousands of locals to showcase these Bajan experiences. So with that, we create an inclusive and transformative tourism model, which means utilizing all the non-traditional aspects of tourism. Actually, last year, Barbados was featured as only one of 10 global destinations in a new documentary series by Sustainable Travel International called Sustainable Travel, Where Next? And with that, in that documentary where we showcase Barbados, we actually showcase these small, authentic experiences to the world. And we're also one of only 3 destinations in Central America and the Caribbean that's currently one of the top 100 global green destinations. So from farm to table, culinary experiences, to recycling and reusing, reuse programs. So each of these episodes of the documentary showcase these real life examples of sustainable travel. So really, to preserve the story of our destination, we believe that Barbados will have to launch several initiatives to promote these the unique Bajan culture and these experiences to ensure the environmental sustainability of the entire destination. Thank you.
I have some other questions, but I will pass, Honourable Member. Thank you so much.
Is this a follow-up question?
I had some, but I will let the other members speak, sir.
You are permitted if there is a follow-up question, which is in relation to what you asked previously. You can so...
Okay, yes, I'm aware. I was going to let the other members speak. Okay, so I understand what sustainable tourism is, and I've heard that being explained during the course of this conversation on the first day. But my question was specifically on ecotourism, and not the wider version of sustainable tourism. And I wanted to understand that in relation to particularly its financing, because I know when I was in another place, as Minister of Maritime, there was a study that was done a few years back that suggested tourists were willing to pay directly a little something toward the preservation of the environment, and toward us maintaining the beauty, the rustic beauty that they think Barbados has, specifically toward maintaining the ocean space. And I think the PS was getting very close to the answer in relation to the things being done for ecotourism, which is my question. So I wanted to know what were the plans specifically for ecotourism and not the wider definition of what sustainable tourism is.
The Permanent Secretary will address the question. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. One other initiative that I can speak to is the multi-destination marketing that we have been engaged with talks with Guyana, for instance, to see how we can pair and partner where a tourist can experience the 2 destinations simultaneously, where a tourist can come, either go to Guyana and experience much of the ecotourism, some of the things that Barbados do not have. Well, then on the completion of that, then come to Barbados. So we have been in talks about that area and building it out. In addition to what we are doing in Barbados, we have looked at the Ministry of Examining how, for instance, we can align our policies with that of the Ministry of Environment, where there have been tourists who've expressed a desire and interest, for instance, in planting trees to help mitigate their carbon footprint in the flight over from the Europe. In particular, the tourists arriving from that destination they have been very attracted towards helping us in reducing our carbon footprint in that area. So these are some of the areas that have been under consideration. In fact, we have looked at
them paying, for instance, as much as about $5 or $10 to partner with us to plant a tree that we will preserve for a number of years to help Barbados in terms of its own carbon footprint. These are initiatives that we will continue to explore, and there will be announcements as we go on and we further cement and concretize these ideas as we bring them to fore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, PS.
Sir, with your leave, the chair of the BTMI would also like to add some comments. With your leave, thanks.
Shelley Williams, again from Chair of BTMI. I want to say that we do have something called the Mindful Travel or the Mindful Traveler. It is something that is very important for Europeans. So when they do come down, yes, part of planting trees are one of them. They also help with the sea turtles and the nesting of the sea turtles, helping to salvage them. But we also in cruise, where cruise we have representation in Miami. One of our SBDOs, our Senior Business Development Officer, is actually engaging in talks with the Disney cruise lines, who are very interested in offering some finance and initiatives for sustainability and protecting the ecosystem within Barbados. Even though they are not yet sailing here, they have shown a great interest and they have reached out to us about partnering with us on an initiative to help us with our sea and our shorelines and our reefs. So we are definitely top of mind. Ecotourism is top of mind for us, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to get right to my questions because I know that time is of the essence. Minister, colleagues, good to see everyone. I'm going to start at a very macro place in the sector because there is a perception that there is some level of tourism investment in Barbados that is too much. There's a perception that we are dragging a sector with us that we need to bring into the 21st century. Notwithstanding the fact that this is a sector that, like it or not, has distinguished itself as one of the most productive for the people of this country. So I wanted, Minister, to give you and your team the opportunity to address a particular question, and it is this. What do you consider to be the scope for growth in this sector? Have we done the work to say across the sectors that integrate with tourism proper, but also the linkages with agriculture, with beauty, with ecotourism, etc., is there a ceiling? So in other words, is this sector contributing all that it can? Is there more that it can contribute? Is there real scope for growth? How much more bang can we get for the bucks that we are investing in these estimates? Because I want to hear whether we are trying to return to some level of normal. We have a cap. We keep hearing the 40% contribution to GDP. What is the real scope for growth that you consider that through your stewardship and the officers here, we will be able to see?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will address the issue as well as I will ask the Permanent Secretary to speak to it. Let me give you my scope, and I do so because having worked within the hospitality sector for all of my life, I am a true believer in it. I believe that there is significant scope within the tourism sector. One of the things I think that we as a country we have to get better at is how, one, do we create additional wealth within the tourism sector? And secondly, how do we increase yields from the tourism sector so that we can, and by extension, extrapolate more spend from visitors when we get them on island. In respect of building out wealth, there are a number of vehicles that I think that hitherto we have not utilized, that we could utilize in order to build additional hotels in Barbados. And if we were to do that, it would also not only constitute and define the ownership class, but it would also allow a lot of other persons who hitherto have not had an investment in tourism to do so. The other issue is, how do we create wealth? And by vehicles, I mean, for example, that we should perhaps start looking at opportunities for maybe venture capitalists with full participation of the Barbadian public. Maybe we should go the route of having maybe an initial IPO or floating a company on a local stock exchange or refloating it elsewhere, any other stock market. I give you my example, having worked for Elegant Hotels. That was St. James Beach Hotels, as it were, was the first public entity in Barbados to be listed on the UK stock market. And later on, it went through private equity funding, and then a couple of years thereafter, it again was relisted as Elegant Hotels on the London Stock Exchange. That, when we exited that created a bounty for the shareholders who were involved in that. And it all had to do with the fact that predominantly, with the exception of one person, you had an executive leadership team who flogged the horse, as I would refer to it, and delivered to a stock market, and which also did justice to Barbados as a destination, its reputation, but also allowed persons to see what local people can do. So I believe if we can come up with either equity arrangement, institutions in Barbados, in order to build out, I think we could realize in a very material way the benefits, additional benefits of tourism. And that's one area where I think we could focus on. Whether we are getting the best bang for a buck in this market has to do, one, with how entities are managed. If you have very sound management, you will always get decent and proper returns. The investment climate in Barbados is ripe compared to some other countries. When you look and see, for example, the incentives under the TDAA and other incentives that are available for the development of tourism, there's actually no comparison to some other jurisdictions. When you look at the fact that Barbados and investors in anything in Barbados can register their inflows with the central bank and pay dividends through that process, and with no hindrance at all, that also speaks to the depth of what us as a people, what we've been able to do over time. But our primary consideration has to be, how do we extrapolate more? And if we continue the process of reinvestment in hotels, which obviously has to be done, and I've seen it because I've lived it, and you refurbish your hotel, you do some, annual capex expenditure, that will always put you in a position where you can increase your room rate. And whenever the room rate is increased, there are often no difficulties with all tour partners, be it online operators, be it tour operators, other partners in the business, because they are seeing the value that we are offering. And I think, and in addition to that, even now, not now, but even with the food and beverage concessions that are available within the sector, compared to some other countries, you have a wonderful opportunity to bring quality, and you have a wonderful opportunity to get a decent return. And I speak from experience when I tell you that if a hotel or any other entity is properly managed, you can drop between 35 to 40 cents to the dollar. So I believe there, to answer your question, Honourable Member, there is significant uptake and opportunity available. It is how we put the mechanisms in place to ensure we can build out that. I'll ask the Permanent Secretary if she wishes to add. Thank you. BS.
Thank you, Minister. The question is, how can we create growth? And I would respond by indicating that tourism is not a standalone industry. It needs transportation, it needs agriculture, it needs manufacturing, and all of these additional sectors that create linkages in order for tourism to be successful. And recently, the ministry had a carrying capacity study undertaken. And that study, we were interested in determining, is Barbados saturated? Are we at full capacity when it comes to accommodation and how we utilize the resources around us? We took a look at how do we look in terms of the environment, in terms of our social network, and also from the economic perspective. And I would indicate that the outcome has shown us that we are not saturated. There is still opportunity for us for growth. We've talked about this, but we need to put very strategic and deliberate actions to be able to fuse tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, and these types of agencies, these types of sectors, I should say, to be able to promote further growth, to generate, to move our GDP even higher. The opportunity is there for us as we, for the first time, also take deliberate steps to move our civil aviation sector to one that supports tourism, which we have not done in the past. We have the major opportunity now through that body, as I mentioned on Monday, to be able to go into new markets, to be able to sell ourselves, to have new airlines as a result of having the Civil Aviation Authority develop and position in a manner that shows us that we are on top of our security and safety, and we are able to manage our skies to be able to attract new airlines and create the demand in the market for us to have new tourists here. And that has to be buttressed with us also inviting investors, whether local or international, to look at the opportunities for further accommodation. We're seeing it evolve through the villa market and the Airbnbs, and persons are now offering services in tourism where traditionally these services were not offered. So I believe that when we are able to harness these different types of strands and make them into more holistic plans, which is where the ministry, the direction where we're going, it offers us a greater opportunity to add more and more to the revenue generated from tourism. And I would say, too, that this has become even more acute after we are now in the process of evolving from the COVID-19 pandemic, because that has shown us categorically the linkages that have existed within the tourism sector between the various sectors that out there that we probably never registered before. And it has shown us what are some of the additional initiatives that we can put in place to create further growth in this sector. So to answer your question, I do believe that there is opportunity for more growth. It is not saturated as persons may perceive, and the ministry is working now to be able to move it in that direction. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for those reflections. I do think it might be useful at some point to try and quantify that capacity for growth, to be able to say, as it relates to GDP, what can we expect can be a greater contribution to the tourism and international transport sector, because I think that would answer a lot of the questions that float around out there. You know, we tend to suggest, as we should, that the first tourist is a Bajan, For me, that doesn't mean from the experiential perspective. It doesn't just mean that we create attractions and that we want Bajans to behave as tourists. What it means is what that says to me is that what we're doing is not just developing the country for the visitor economy, but in a way that it benefits Barbadians economically, but also in the everyday things. And so that brings me to my next question, which flows naturally, Minister, from what you were saying about creating a tourism sector in which Barbadians can invest, in which all Barbadians can, through some platform, invest and see a return. Because I think what Barbadians are listening to hear from us is, what is my role in the tourism sector? Not just to be employed, and not just to be kind of the product, because Bajans are the product. And if Bajans are the product, Bajans should be benefiting from the sector. And they're listening to us to hear how is that going to be real. So then I want to look at Program 332, Subprogram 350 of your estimates, Minister, which relates to the Small Hotels Investment Fund. I know that is one of the investment funds that the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited is helping to support. The Enterprise Growth Fund Limited also has a separate tourism stream, and then there has also been the BEST program. And I really would like to get a sense of what has been the performance of these kinds of resources targeted towards the renewal of the tourism products and the tourism plans in this country. And I ask because, and you hear that I mentioned the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited, because we have spoken for some time about being able to set up real impactful tourism investment funds. And I really want to get a sense of, have these efforts really had the impact that we expect? And if not, what are the plans for these kinds of funds and investments, in particular through entities like the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited, in which arguably there's much space to have this kind of fund management and investment vehicle? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I do agree with you that we have to see how best we can get Barbadians generally, more Barbadians I should add, invested into the tourism sector. Indeed, the policy initiative that was taken some years ago in respect to the incentives for the taxi operators is but one, I think, very good example of how we've been able to create entrepreneurs out of the tourism sector. These persons have done exceedingly well. They have obviously maintained a fleet, and they have, in my judgment, the best taxi fleet anywhere to compare with any island, not only Caribbean, but beyond. And I think that's but one opportunity where you have good participation, where persons were able to build a business, have a fleet of taxis, and also individuals who were able to benefit in a fundamental way, that they were even able to acquire their own homes and go into private investments and other real estate opportunities. In respect of the BEST program, I will ask our Deputy Permanent Secretary to speak to that. But before I do so, the whole issue of investment, I have long maintained, only because when I worked in the sector, I had an opportunity to have a glimpse at some of the product that we were offering on island. And clearly, when I was there was an urgent need for substantial investments to be made. There was one entity within our portfolio, not originally in the portfolio, that was struggling. And by putting together an investment opportunity, we were able to create a wonderful asset that paid back for itself in less than 2 years. I don't want to call the entity's name, but not too far from Prospect, there was a limping asset that was turned around and remains in the tourism sector as a wonderful product. I'm a firm believer that there has to be a financial stability study of hotels. There are a number of hotels on this island who are highly leveraged. That is good and that is bad. Because if your gearing is too high, you know what happens, the attendant consequences. What we need to do is, once we have a financial stability study, that would then allow us as a country to chart a specific course for the redevelopment of properties, and it can be done. People criticize us when you talk about going into negotiations and trying to restructure debt. And when we did so, there were people who complained generally. But I can tell you from my private sector experience that I've worked for the company and they have had to restructure the debt, and they did it in the fundamental way in order to enhance and its standing and obviously to take more cash out of the business, and that's a fact. We also, I think, need additional investment funds. You mentioned the small hotels. I had the opportunity to meet, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, with the Intimate Hotels of Barbados Group, their leadership and executive team. And I made reference to them and I said to them, and I gave them some examples. Even though you have small properties, with some investment, you can then boost those properties so that they become boutique hotels. There's no secret that there was a hotel on the West Coast named Buccaneer that was later changed to the House. And that was, you know, a small property in need of urgent repair. It was fixed, but can I tell you that the average room rate there exceeded some of the room rates that we would have got even in what we would call highly reputable and established properties. And that was brought up to a luxury property. And the story that was told is the story and the success of that product alone. I made that point because there are a number of small hotels who I think can reposition themselves into a boutique-style hotel. For example, only last year, not because I'm privy to it, but look and see where Caribou was located, near the Dover playing field. It was a rundown property. It was refurbished and enhanced. And today, can I tell you that that facility carries an average occupancy in excess of 90% and is doing well financially. No, I'm not saying that because I have an interest, so let me declare my hand. I'm saying that because I know of the performance of the entity. But I do agree that we need to get more funding, and I believe it's an opportunity for us, for example, to look for other sources of funding, maybe the Africa Exim Bank, where we can perhaps channel a lot more resources for refurbishment with a clear plan of action that wants to refurbish the hotels, and you classify them into whatever categories that are required to be classified, that they too can come out with gains that others have done. And that is by perhaps one example, but I think we need to have additional funding. I also believe if you want to become more transformational, that I think we should perhaps look and see what are some of the other investment vehicles that we should attach ourselves to. And there are multiple investment vehicles out there. The issue is always, you know, getting people to buy into something that people believe is not a good business. And I can tell you from my previous experience that I have enjoyed, like most people, a good opportunity to work within the hotel sector. All I got is as a result of that sector, and therefore I think that sometimes people underrate the performance of the sector. But I'll come back to this. Solid management is also the answer to solid investments. P.S., I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
Thank you, Minister. Minister did indicate that there are a number of instruments and vehicles that can be used to incentivize Barbadian partnership or participation within the hotel sector. And I believe government, for instance, had, in the same vein in how announcements were made with respect to the energy sector as we transition there from fossil fuel to renewable energy, and the demarcation of some percentage for Barbadians there is an opportunity within the sector where some of these smaller hotels can be pooled and refurbished and offered to Barbadians as for purchase of shares within these as an instrument or a particular vehicle that can be used to encourage participation. I've seen in the past, we would have done this, for instance, when we were able to, Barbados that is, offered the then Barbados National Bank for sale. You had participation there of locals and other areas, ICBL, for instance. So I think if we were able to pool resources and create the opportunity for Barbadians, we recognize that within the marketplace, Barbados is seen as luxurious and an aspirational destination. We attract persons who are usually of high net worth. And our recent experience, even within the Gulf, persons are looking for opportunities to relocate to destinations, particularly in the summer, where it is extremely hot, to find a destination that they can locate, and they usually travel with an entourage, and be part of the experience for a month to 2 months, which they stay. I see an opportunity there for us with the small hotels to be able to tap into that market and have Barbadians, and however it is structured, be part owners, so we share within the wealth and not just simply supply labor as part of our service to the hotel sector and the tourism sector. So I think as we pursue and have continued discussions in the ministry, there will be some of these initiatives that we will bring to the table, to the fore, and certainly as we have discussions with the IHS, which is the Intimate Hotels Group, to buy in their approval, to have their approval and willingness to participate in an initiative such as this that would allow certainly that group to be further strengthened and move from and place on a trajectory of growth than the stagnation where they are at this point. So I think there are opportunities there, and these are some of the initiatives that we are examining closely in the ministry to see how best these ideas can be commercialized and brought to the fore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Minister and PS.
Chair, sorry. I wanted to ask the DPS, in respect of your question, in respect of the BEST program, to respond. DPS.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Nicole Taylor, the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport. So the BEST program, which is Barbados Employment and Sustainable Transformation Program, was established by the government in October 2020 to stimulate the transformation of the tourism and direct tourism-related service sectors, as well as protect employment in the sectors as a result of the devastation that we know was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the program had two major tenets. It was alluded to that one of those tenets was investment, but obviously one of them, as we know, was re-engagement of employees. There was also a training program that was expected, that was necessary, because the thinking was that at the time, there was not a lot of business happening in the country. People couldn't travel. Tourists were not here. But you wanted the workers, when they returned, to be upskilled. And so a training program was implemented with the assistance of the National Transformation Initiative. And then there was the investment that Minister Cattle, you would have alluded to. There was investment opportunities available in greening and digitization, and this included renewable energy installations like photovoltaic systems, water conservation, and increased use of technology and process digitization to upgrade business processes. So many of the properties took advantage of that. They also were able to upgrade their plants and focus on refurbishment and expansion of the properties. This program was for 2 years. It ended in September 2022. And, in terms of figures, you would say about 13 businesses consisting of hotels, attractions, restaurants, and so on. Even car rental companies were able to take advantage of this investment opportunity. Thank you.
I also ask Chair of the BTMI, Mrs. Shelley Williams, to speak on the matter as well on the accelerator program. Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Minister. We are well aware that there are people now, younger people, that are less interested in tourism. They don't see the connectivity between tourism and their entrepreneurship. And when I took up the chairmanship, I decided that we are going to pay more attention to those persons. We have started a food accelerator program, and this program allows manufacturers, persons who manufacture drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. We've had people that manufacture pasta, their own homemade pasta, things of this nature. But they want to be able to connect their products with tourists, with non-nationals, and even use our platform in order to get more exposure for their business. I see tourism and BTMI as being that vehicle for those persons. There are a lot of people that are now are influencers, social media. You're now going to see that we have started our program where we now bring in influencers and take them around with us in order to highlight what the average Barbadian, how it feels to be in Barbados. And they're paid for their work, as well as get exposure. You have, we're now looking into, we've hired some young photographers as well at the BTMI, freelance, who are now going around and taking those pictures and buying those pictures and buying that content from them. So even though you may not be in tourism, you may not work in a hotel, tourism is sustainable and is a part of all of us, and we can be that vehicle. BTMI can be that vehicle and that platform to either showcase your business or whatever you're manufacturing, as well as help promote or even give you business. So we have persons doing jewelry, and we have persons doing swimsuits. We have persons doing purses and wallets and things of that nature. We take those with us when we go to showcase Barbados. So we show not only Barbados as the hotel and the perfect destination and the people, but the talent and the commerce that the people also have. And we are also in talks right now to have a retail. We're the only destination that doesn't have a retail store within our ports that belong to us, that only sell our stuff. And I don't mean just branded Barbados, I mean made by a Barbadian, produced by a Barbadian, and sold by us and endorsed by us. And we are in talks of that. So I look at it, when you talk about the macro level, I think tourism has a role of growth for everyone in different sectors. Food, retail, and even when they are looking at newer things like influencers and social media and those social platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. My last question, and let me say thanks for all of the varied responses. Just to say, P.S., that I hear the opportunities. Given that we are discussing estimates, I hope that these opportunities will be reflected in future estimates, because I think that this exercise of programming has to make the bread and butter financial activities of the government. So I look forward next year when we're here to seeing these opportunities that you discuss programmed in these numbers, because ultimately government shows its priorities and its intent in this document. So thank you for those responses. My last question is one question, but it relates to, well, let me say it relates to subprogram 40. Program 40, subprogram 599 of your estimates, Minister, which is the National Tourism Program. But I want to ask it in the context of the discussions we've been having about Bridgetown. We heard a lot about Pelican and about different, the path from the port up into town and how that could be developed. But this is a bigger, larger, more fundamental question about Bridgetown. I understand that there has been an entity established, a kind of a city management center now established to focus on the regeneration of Bridgetown, and to focus on investment in the capital. And at the same time, there exists this National Tourism Program, which is funded, which is multilateral development bank funding, and we know that those have to be executed within a certain time. So my question really is, given that there is this new city management center, and resources, not in your estimates, Minister, but resources presumably allocated to having this focus on a renewed and regenerated Bridgetown. Obviously, that cannot be a government project, but it can be facilitated by the government because it has to be able to crowd in private sector investment. And then there's this National Tourism Program, which I'm asking about when we will see the impact and the outcomes from this program, because this has been, I don't know what is the life of the program, how many years on the books, but this has certainly been some time that it has been on the books. And there is an opportunity to twin that work with whatever the government is investing through the City Management Center, which has tremendous potential, and I really do hope it is appropriately resourced. So I want to get an update on that in terms of outcomes, and when we will have outcomes on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Excellent question indeed. I'm going to ask Ms. Nicole Allen to address the outcomes and impacts. What I will tell you is that there is a US $20 million loan through the IADB. The loan was for 5 years. As I've been advised, we lost some of those years as a result of COVID. But I do share your perspective, and therefore I will ask Ms. Nicole Allen, who leads that National Tourism Program, to address your specific question with respect to the impact and, of course, the outcomes. Ms. Allen?
Good morning, members of this Honourable Chamber. My name is Nicole Allen, and I'm the project coordinator of the Project Execution Unit for the National Tourism Program. Thank you for your question, Member of Parliament Cadell. With respect to the National Tourism Program, I want to say at the outset that we have two types of output: those which are tangible and can be readily seen, and those which are, I would say, intangible, but there are things that are happening. I know people like to see things to think that something is going on, but certainly under component 2, let me start there, for the National Tourism Program, of which the BTMI is the primary beneficiary, and that one focuses on strengthening digital marketing. And under that, one of the key outputs has been enhancements to Barbados' official tourism website, where we did two types of work. We did feature enhancements, which resulted in a number of user-generated content being added to that website to reflect the different niches and the different product offerings that the BTMI is focusing on, whether it is things like Bajan stories, Bajan cultures, and so forth. And that consultancy was completed in its totality in July of last year. So that is one output under component 2 that has been completed, but obviously that's not anything that you walk along the street and you see. Also under component 2, there's a major deliverable there is a tool called the Tourism Insights tool, which is really going to allow the BTMI to be very targeted in how it does its marketing, being able to understand the demographic of the visitors who are coming to Barbados, what it is they're looking at, and even before they get to Barbados, being able to see the type of information they are researching on Barbados, which allows then the BTMI to be strategic and respond to what the market is saying. We heard on Monday the need for the BTMI to be data-driven in terms of how it does its business. And this Tourism Insights tool that is being done through MasterCard International allows them to do exactly that real-time disaggregated data that allows them to be very focused. And we have signed that consultancy. It has started. As a matter of fact, there will be a training workshop by the consulting team that works with MasterCard to show the BTMI team, the ministries team, how best to use the tool and so on. So I want to say that in that quote-unquote intangible way where it has been going. To your pointed question now in terms of Bridgetown and the collaboration with the new entity that has been formed, and when you asked the question, when are we going to see things happening there? Let me say, Member of Parliament Catalan, I know you held this portfolio, so you know. I can't hide anything from you, you know. We certainly have been, and I can use this word, I hope, we've been body slammed by COVID. That really has put places on the back foot, and we've lost lots of time. We've lost lots of time in having the loan restructured, which took us all the way down to December of 2019. And then along when we were ready to start in March of 2020 and get going, along came COVID and it really put us on the back foot. So we have lost significant time, which we're actively engaging the IDB on as we speak to have the program extended to make up for this lost time. But in terms of the work we're doing in the Bridgetown area, I mentioned on Monday, we just got our file back from the Special Tenders Committee for a number of design and supervision consultancies for 7 products. 4 of which are going to be located here in Barbados. The way the National Tourism Program has been structured, we really, because of all that lost time, had to consolidate and truncate our procurement activities. We're working with the IDB to utilize a procurement process called the Framework Agreement, where we've gone into the market one single time for 7 consultancies, and then we will have a pool of consulting firms who will be issued what are called call-off contracts as we are ready for them to get started. So that's one way we have addressed the loss of time to help us to get to market quicker, that you can actually see things happening here in the Bridgetown area. So those the requests for expressions of interest will be shortly advertised for those, so that we can have things happening that you can visually see. But more earlier than that is the work we're currently doing at the museum, which is firstly to improve their car park, and we're also going to be upgrading 3 of their exhibition galleries. They're all Harewood and Jubilee galleries. We've already engaged the consultant for the design work. We expect to have in our hands in another 2 weeks, early March, the 2 conceptual designs for those upgrades to the car park, and shortly thereafter we will have preliminary designs on which tender documents will be built and we'll be able to go into the market. So I beg your indulgence, please, to just give us a little bit more time to see these things come to fruition, to see a lot more activity in the media indicating the work that we're doing, and then to just physically see it so that you know that the taxpayers' money that is being repaid paid is being judiciously used for the benefit of our country, Barbados. So that is where we are at this point in time with the National Tourism Program. Thank you.
But Mr. Chair, by way of quick follow-up, thank you for that response. The reason that I emphasize the city center management effort and the National Tourism Program, and the reason I reflected earlier that the first tourist is a Bajan, is that to me, I tend to talk about a visitor economy, which is much wider than the tourism sector. It is about how easily people can come here and live here. But the fact that the first tourist is a Bajan means that my first concern is also a Bajan. If the country is good for Bajans, it will be good for tourists. And so my first concern always is, yes, to develop a country that is marketable, but we're not doing that so we get tourist spend. Fundamentally, we're doing it so people live well. The other day I was driving past the Oval and I saw a person who may have been a tourist, because sometimes you don't know, but we'd like to feel that we can spot a tourist. A man who was in a device to aid in his mobility. So it was not quite a wheelchair, a motorized kind of scooter kind of thing, but he clearly needed it to move around. He got to a place in the sidewalk where he could not mount the pavement, right? Now, if he can't mount the pavement in something with a motor, the average Barbadian that has to move around in a wheelchair through Bridgetown similarly cannot. So yes, we talk all the time about what is happening with Bridgetown. We have the City Management Center that I hope that along with BTI and along with the National Tourism Program, because that is a part of your scope, I think, to make Bridgetown feel better and be more livable. I think there needs to be some kind of coordination among these entities, and hopefully through the City Management Center, that will make Bridgetown the thing of our dreams. And perhaps this is less a follow-up question and more a follow-up reflection, but I think that what is critical is for all of the agencies that are responsible for this, and all of the resources, including under the National Tourism Program, and under perhaps the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited, that is perhaps sitting as one of the most untapped resources in this whole government framework, perhaps through these, all of these vehicles, to be able to address all of these things. It makes no sense to have a lovely attraction and a tourist or a Bajan in a wheelchair or with crutches or with some other challenge of moving can't get to it. And so I just leave that there to be able to start the conversation on the integration of efforts. Because unless you have Bridgetown as a product that makes sense for people, then you're losing out on some of that growth in the sector, Minister, that you suggested to us is possible.
I'm just going to ask you, Minister, to hold your response. Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Minister, I really want to start this morning by commending you and your team for acquitting yourself as well as you have done on Monday and this morning in sharing with the country the work that we are doing to reposition not just the tourism industry, but to reposition Barbados as a hub of choice for both air and maritime transport. The reality is that we have a duty to be able to leverage the geography that is ours, that was leveraged by others in our name before. And I ask myself, what is the next frontier? Because as the port undertakes the completion of its build-out that Mr. Jean-Marie shared with us on Monday, that's really only going to take us to dealing with today's problems. It's going to give us the container examination facility, the aggregate facility, which must become a public-private investment, not to be controlled by contractors, but to be open to everyone for investment. The boat repair facility that is 3 decades or more overdue, so that people don't have to go to Grenada or St. Lucia or Trinidad, down Chagaramas, to fix their boats. What is the next frontier? If Barbados is to be, and I'm sorry we don't have a map in Parliament, and maybe, Mr. Chairman, we have to make provision for these facilities as we go forward as a Parliament. But if you were to envisage a map of the Caribbean, you would see that in the north, Mr. Jean-Marie, there is Bahamas and Jamaica and Miami controlling port movements, correct? For transshipment. And then there's the Panama Canal, which Barbadians should know better than anybody else because we supplied more people to Panama than any other country in the construction of that canal. It is my humble submission to you, Minister, that there is tremendous opportunity that we need now to secure and build for Barbados as a hub of choice again for transshipment, especially as the Africa Free Trade Area is being undertaken. And only this weekend, the Africa Union met with the leaders of Africa to reinforce their commitment to that. But it also positions us with respect to Latin America. And let me capture it better also for the BTMI, who I know is looking to help us open up Latin America. One, it is quicker to fly from Barbados to Buenos Aires, Barbados to Dakar, Barbados to Accra, Barbados to many other cities in that, to Sao Paulo, than it is from Barbados to London. But yet we have almost, 25, 27 flights a week to the United Kingdom. So that is as a result of historical nurturing of that market. If you want to go to Buenos Aires, because of the exchange rate, the cost of living, and Bajans who want to go on holiday will find that their money will move far more, and they'll get far more going south or going east than going north. I had the opportunity to be in Buenos Aires for the CELAC meeting, the summit of the leaders of Latin America and the Caribbean, a month ago. And I was amazed at how affordable it is for the average Barbadian. And I'm not talking about rich Barbadians now. That top restaurants in Buenos Aires, more than affordable for what you would buy even at Chefette Barbecue Barn here. I believe that the time has come for your ministry to set out, and I'd like to know where you are with it, a vision to make Barbados a domicile of choice as a hub for maritime and air logistics, for cargo as much as people. And as I said, when you look at where we are to the south of the Caribbean, and with what's happening in Guyana, what's happening in Brazil, the landlocked aspects of Brazil, the opportunities are there. And I'd like to know whether your ministry is undertaking the work to reposition this country as that hub of choice. I'll come back with 2 other points after. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member, Prime Minister. Yes, I can let you know that the government-elect, Mr. Jarmy, speak on the port side and the expansion there. But certainly part of the strategy is building out Barbados as a hub has to do as well with what I would have announced on Monday, the expansion of the strategy to expand our footprint within the Latin American market, and to have that as a station in Panama, but also servicing with officers Argentina and Brazil, and obviously going right through South America. We believe that if, as part of this strategy, we have to put the resources behind the gateway and have our presence felt in the market. By doing so, we will continually build out the required, what I call soft infrastructure, in order to build out Barbados as that hub. With respect to aviation, we have and we've received multiple interests from airlines out of the African continent who would want to fly into Barbados. We have, and I can confirm and let you and other members of the chamber know that we have updated air services agreement. We are looking to one or two, I don't want to announce them at this point, airlines who have approached us from the African continent who would want to do business with us in Barbados and create a flight path from Africa into Barbados and then onwards out to London and or the United States of America. And the beautiful thing of having updated the services agreement is that these agreements would allow the airline or any potential airline to not only fly to Barbados unencumbered, but also to drop, pick up, and move on to any point in between and to any end point, as they refer to in aviation jargon. We are also in discussion with a number of interesting parties to see how best we can build out the Grantley Adams International Airport as a hub. Oftentimes we have the cargo bay on some airlines leaving Barbados without the appropriate cargo. And we believe that that's a wonderful opportunity, working with agriculture as well, to move exports from Barbados into other markets. We are also of the firm belief that in respect of cargo moving now from the seaport, that there are a range of opportunities. Mr. David Jomry, CEO of the port, would have addressed a number of the initiatives planned there. But in order to not only move to a standard, and I believe as well that there was I know there was a team that would have visited some other ports, I believe Qatar and others, looking at how they build out their platform. What I will do, I will pause. I will ask Mr. David Jomry to speak specifically to the arrangements at the seaport, and then I'll come back. Mr. Jomry.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Chairman, I wish to assure the House that we are in sync with the vision as articulated by the Prime Minister. We just need to accelerate a bit more. We have been in consultation with the representatives of the shipping lines, the global shipping lines that operate, in order to see where the demand will be for business between Africa and Barbados, and South America through Barbados also. Those conversations are ongoing. We have prepared sister port agreements. Some of them are in draft. We have one with the Port of Mombasa and a few others that we are engaging with. In the meantime, we are building out the hardware, as I described on Monday, in terms of expanding the port with respect to the berth, the equipment and so on, the ferry facilities and so on. We're building out those at this point in time in order to have that ability to accommodate the type of vessels that will come here to provide to require transshipment of goods. Those are some of the areas for now.
What you're doing with the existing berths is still small. Is that correct? And the new berth 6 is still small.
Still small, yes.
If you were to have to reposition Barbados, it will require a significant rethink and expansion of the Bridgetown port as is, even just looking at what is possible for the direction of expanding the port. Is that correct?
Correct, Prime Minister.
And the truth is, both the Bridgetown Fishing Harbour and the Bridgetown port are now in urgent need of major expansion if we are to meet those demands. Over the next 30 years, not the next 5, In other words, when we are long gone, sir.
I agree, Prime Minister, and we have been engaging, for example, with the African Import-Export Bank. We had meetings with them. They are quite ripe in terms of wanting to invest here in Barbados. I agree, Prime Minister. Our current breakwater, for example, was built back in 1961.
That's the point.
Still being used.
61 is how long ago?
Prime Minister, that's supposing our ages. It's at
It
least
is
60
also
years ago.
61 or 62 years old. So it matches the year in which it was opened.
Correct. It was built at a time when sugar was king, and we needed to have the berths close enough to the sugar loaders and the ships. That's no longer relevant. We've already dismantled the chutes, and we're going to dismantle the rest of the sugar loaders during the summer. It is now being used for home porting, for example, but the apron is only 30 feet. So it's too narrow to accommodate the provisioning, the bunkering, and the garbage disposal. So we need to re-engineer that, perhaps go to the west, build out another arm, which would be of the width suitable to accommodate the growing cruise home porting that we are undertaking. Home porting has grown way beyond our expectations. We were targeting 20% by 2025. We're not 50% of the business. So we need to move in that direction. There have been 3 attempts, at least during my time, Prime Minister, to build out new cruise facilities. One in the early mid-90s, a one pier. That didn't work. Then there was one in 2020, which would have been a more significant expansion. And then, of course, there was one about 2 years ago involving the cruise lines, and then COVID kind of put that on hold, where the cruise lines actually participated in the design of a build-out of several piers and reclaiming land, building out new facilities, pledged about $100 million, and then COVID hit. So we are now rethinking how we can get into a partnership, PPP, somehow with other entities, perhaps the African Import-Export Bank, in building up not only cruise facilities, but cargo facilities that take us into the next 30 to 50 years.
Thank you. If I may, through you, Mr. Chair. The reality is that the government has announced, and I did it 2 weeks ago, that both the airport and seaport must, in their holding companies, open up to enfranchise both the workers in those respective institutions, and if the National Insurance Scheme is so interested in the first round, that before we get to other institutional investors, pension funds that are local. That is to facilitate that holding company being able to have shares in any subsidiary company that can then partner with the private sector or other local investors or foreign investors in order to develop specific aspects of each of those ports, airport and seaport. Against the backdrop of the work that has to be done to bring them on board in the next 12 months as joint shareholders, improving the corporate governance, that then allows you to be able to bring in additional investment, not simply as debt, but as equity, which will allow for the expansion of the Bridgetown port at a more rapid rate. I'd like you to indicate as well whether you have started those discussions, and if not, when you propose to start them as a matter of urgency, so that we can have engaged all of the institutional arrangements that can ultimately unlock the future expansion to meet the needs not of this generation of Barbadians, but of the next generation of Barbadians. And secondly, since this is my last outing, I believe, Mr. Chairman, as I'm only entitled to 3 questions at once, I'd also like to take into account that the potential for the growth of cruise in the Middle East and Africa, and the BTMI may have to come in on this point, is huge, since they only command less than 5% of the global cruise market, but yet the income increases in those who can afford cruises. In fact, I think Nigeria has the largest fleet of privately owned aircraft in the world, which should speak per capita, which should speak volumes, as well as the Gulf states, as to the potential for that. But in so doing, and in opening up these other markets, what are the plans, Minister, for the provision of training for our hotel and port workers, airport and seaport workers, in language, conversational language, to be able to facilitate us opening up these markets to a wider group of people than those who traditionally speak English from the North Atlantic countries? So that what I'm really asking you all to do is to speak to the plans for the repositioning of Barbados as a hub, but also equipping our people to be able to meet the needs of that repositioning as a hub effectively and efficiently. Thank you. And once again, I thank all who are here, because I really do believe that this process in sharing with the country allows Barbadians to know in detail mode, rather than just being the recipient of a sexy headline with a sexy story that doesn't necessarily advance anybody's ability to go forward.
Thank you, Prime Minister. What I'll do, I'll ask Mr. David Jean-Marie to speak to some of the plans first. We bring in the BTMI, and then we'll also come back on training. But I think I should also let the House know that tomorrow, just as a segue into the cruise and how we are preparing, and we do have a strategic plan, which I should be receipt of next month. But tomorrow, once again, we will have 9,500 passengers docking here on 5 ships. I just thought I'd share that with you, because the last time we had 1 ship here, and we didn't have enough taxis in the Bridgetown port. And tomorrow we will have 5 cruise ships with 9,500 passengers. But Mr. Jean-Marie, I'll let you speak to some of the expansion plans in accordance with the port's business plan and also the master plan. Mr. Jean-Marie.
Thank you, Minister. Just to report, it's interesting your question, Prime Minister. Yesterday, the port's management team, we went through the presentation and finalized the report and presentation that will be made to the board on next Thursday on the transformation of the port. And included in that transformation, apart from the projects that we've identified and all the asset innovation, process innovation, and so on that we discussed, is the second wave of corporatization, as we called it, in which we transition from Barbados Port Inc. as is to a holding company, the port being a landlord port rather than being a tool port. And in that model, the structure would involve, hopefully, as I said, the NIS, the state, of course, and the workers and workers' representatives as the shareholders in the holding company. And we've identified already 9 subsidiary opportunities, which would allow opportunities for Barbadians, ordinary Barbadians, everyone, to participate. We would develop the necessary business plans, issue IPOs, inform the public, and give every person the opportunity to invest in an area of their interest, whether it's the aggregate berth, whether it's cruise business, whether it is the boat repair facilities, whether it is the shallow draft marina facilities, whether it's the people who are interested in technology, whether it's the port community system, which is the biggest initiative in terms of digital transformation being undertaken by the port to facilitate trade, reduce the number of forms, reduce the costs, and so on. So we are on the same page in this respect. I would use the opportunity to speak, for example, the merge. We are, Prime Minister, we are. With respect to the merge, as a simple matter of concern to us, we expend about $10 million of foreign exchange US in the merge being containers remaining in the port for too long. So they're not in the port, outside of the port for too long. And we need to become more efficient, the entire industry. So there are a number of initiatives already in place to deal with those. For example, the Trusted Trader program initiated by the Customs Department, which has as a utility as a pre-clearance program. This, a pre-clearance facility, as reported by the Customs, this is only being used 2% by our importers. So we need to have more importers on board with respect to pre-clearance. We want to reduce truck turnaround time in the port. We have a target of 35 minutes. We've been feeling a bit during the busy periods, but we're going to fix that by acquiring the necessary cargo handling equipment. 5 straddle carriers on order expected by August, 5 more to be ordered by the next board meeting. That's an investment of $30 million in order to ensure that our trucks are able to get the containers out of the port in a timely manner. Of course, we're looking at working hours of the port in addition to those things. So we are looking actively at methods and ways to reduce the time and the cost of operating at the port and eliminating that wastage of foreign exchange, the 10 or so million US dollars in demurrage. Minister reminded me of the stevedore that will go into effect and will be performed by the port effective the 1st of April, in addition to the port being a free out port where all charges will be paid locally. And we will use the opportunity to reduce the cost of transaction business at the port by at least 10%. This is about $10 million in savings.
I'd like, Mr. Chairman, through you for him to repeat that. I also am aware that I actually do have longer time as Prime Minister, so the rules are a good thing. So if he can repeat that point, because no, it is important, because people are concerned about cost of living. And one of the key measures that the government has taken is being able to, and break down for the country what stevedoring is, how it adds to the cost, and why we're removing it. Thank you.
Right, so when the port rationalized in the early 90s, the private stevedores were severed, port longshoremen were also severed, and the workers became port workers with the mantra, port work for port workers. And all activities in the port were performed by port workers. These workers will be contracted by the private stevedore management companies, and stevedoring is basically the discharging and loading of vessels. That side of the water, that's private. And that was being done by these private stevedores. It's kind of a legacy arrangement. The workers were part of the port.
Speaking simple language, Mr. Jean-Marie, was legacy arrangement.
It goes back.
Talk as if you're at the Bush Bar. Please.
It goes back several decades. It was being done by the private sector, the work on board the vessels. So it's just come forward as part of our arrangements over the many years. It was done via contract with the Shipping Association of Barbados. It has been determined that it is now time for the port to transition to handle all activities within the port, including the loading and unloading of vessels. The port employees, workers have been trained in stevedoring operations, and therefore this is a natural transition. It gives us more transparency in the charging for these services, and we have been in conversation we're having conversations with the shipping lines. My understanding is that the presidents of the Florida Shipbuilders Group will be meeting on Thursday, and hopefully by Thursday afternoon they will give us the assurance that we are on the same page. And we, as I said, will use the opportunity at the port to examine the costs. We've looked at all the costs on this side. What is paid through the agent from the shipping line to the port, what is paid directly to the port by the consignee stroke importers. And we have said that we're going to reduce that total by 10%. And we've looked at our cash flows and we can facilitate that. So once the board confirms or agrees to this next Thursday, by the 1st of April, port costs should come down by 10%. And we expect that port cost reduction will filter through to the consignees of Barbados and reduce costs by about $10 million.
And this is on top of already a reduction in international freight prices that you're seeing, sir?
Yes, Prime Minister. And in fact, the whole move away to becoming a free out port is that the port charges that currently are part of freight come out of the freight. So there must be a commitment. The whole purpose of having the conversations with the Florida Shipowners Group is for them to agree that the freight cost will be reduced by the port charges.
In addition to the reduction that is already taking place in international freight again.
Yes, Prime Minister.
Is that the case?
Yes, Prime Minister.
Okay. And I think I'd ask questions of the BTMI out of the same thing with respect to readying our workers and also the potential for Africa and Middle East cruise.
Yeah, okay. I'll ask Ms. Shelley Williams to speak, and then I'll ask the PS to come back. Thanks. Mrs. Williams?
Thank you, Minister. Prime Minister, at this time we are partnering with Future Barbados. BTMI is looking to partner with Future Barbados. It is very important to upskill all of our people in languages. I just came from a big tourism conference in Italy, BIT, and that was paramount. That was the conversation. How many hotels carry Italian-speaking persons? And the truth is, probably little to none at this point. And if we really want to make ourselves a hub and really open up that European business as well as the African business, we need to upskill our people. And we're working with the Future Barbados and with the partnership of BTMI, and we're going to make sure that that happens. As it pertains to opening the market for Africans to take cruise ships through our home porting, well, we can do something very similar to what we did with TUI cruises. We have the TUI charter. We do charters out of UK and Europe with using TUI. We can do that with the African, as you well said, there's so many private charters and so many, airlift is not a problem out of Africa. We can set up a similar program, we've done it before, and that can see to the movement of them coming and doing air and sea, air and land, so they can come, spend a few days in a hotel, and then transition on the cruise throughout the islands and throughout the Caribbean and back. And it may very well open up our summer Caribbean cruising. So that's a good possibility for us. We're going to be on it.
Exactly, so that what you are currently doing with the United Kingdom with P&O can be replicated for Africa and the Gulf states in the Middle East, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, Prime Minister.
As it relates to the language, I'd like to also suggest that the Barbados Community College, the Gina Norma Holder Institute, along with the Barbados Community College Language Lab, along with competency-based software, whether Babbel or Duolingo or whichever one, because what you're not training people to write a thesis. You're training people to be able to work in a functioning environment with respect to things. And because the technology is now available on so many smartphones, it will also assist with the communication as quickly as possible. Sorry, you said that the PS wanted to answer.
Yes,
to
Prime Minister, the PS will also address the issue of additional training, in addition to what we are going to do with Freddie Fantastic that we are going to announce in very shortly. But the PS will give you an update in terms of the languages we have identified and initiatives that we have undertaken. PS.
Thank you, Minister and Prime Minister, for the question. Let me say, only a few weeks ago, about approximately 4 weeks ago exactly, the ministry met with the head of missions of Venezuela. And the objective there being was not just simply a courtesy call, but for us to look at how do we expand language, Spanish in particular, to be taught not simply in the sterile way in which it is done within the school environment, but for workers across Barbados to engage in conversation with Spanish speakers, given, again, our location with Latin America, and trying to increase traffic there in terms of tourist arrivals from that destination. I can say that the meeting was very positive, and out of that came a number of initiatives where the Spanish language is expected to be broadened in terms of how it is taught to workers within the hotel environment, persons who are working within the restaurants, as well as certainly engaging the Barbados Community College Language Center too as well, to see how courses can be done, additional times offered for persons to access training there, that we can broaden the scope of persons who do translation, for instance, for Barbados, to facilitate us at times when we need to provide these types of services at conferences. So these have been part of the wider discussion, but outside of language, the ministry took the opportunity during COVID, at the height of COVID, to also use the BEST program to be able to engage hoteliers to provide training for their workers in a number of areas. And that was done with the premise in mind that when we anticipated that on the outshot of COVID, when that crisis was over, we were positioning the sector to be able to respond in a manner that would allow them to keep Barbados at cutting edge. And therefore, I can report that that program, we partnered with NTI to deliver the National Training Initiative, to be able to deliver training for approximately 25,000 participants across 57 properties, hoteliers who participated in that program. And that covered a number of skills. And I can also indicate NTI has also developed through its online platform with Coursera an initiative that we have been working with the government of Guyana to allow us to sell or basically use Barbados competencies that we have developed in over 70 years of doing this tourism business to help Guyana also position itself or take advantage of its own natural resources that can be used to encourage Barbadians and visitors alike from outside of the region. And for us to build that multi-destination premise that I spoke of, where we partner with them to be able to enhance the tourism product for both countries. And NTI is also offering, through its online platform, training there, and that training is about to commence. 200 persons, I'm told, have been earmarked to engage with this online training, and an additional number of persons are expected to participate in person training with the Norman Holder Institute. And that training is expected to start in July of this year. So we're trying to tackle training from a number of fronts, where we are not only addressing the language, and I know the concerns where we want to make sure that Barbadians are multilingual and not only capable in speaking the English language, but be able to converse with other language, as we seek to broaden the scope for visitors here in Barbados. So I thought I'll share a little bit of what we were doing in the ministry and working with partners such as the Barbados Community College as well as NTI to be able to broaden the scope for training. Thank you.
And if I may add, just to reinforce what the Permanent Secretary indicated, that we also have within the ministry now, and specifically the BTMI, we also have a program running with the BCC, Barbados Community College, and the University of the West Indies, where we're training up both airport and seaport workers in language skills. in order for them to converse with passengers both at the air and seaports. The three languages that we have identified and that we have to pursue, those are Spanish, Portuguese, as well as French. That dovetails with the overall strategy, marketing strategy that we have in place, where we want to bring more visitors from France and those territories, French-speaking territories. We are also focusing on our quest to push the Latin American market, and we know that we have to have those skills in place along with Portuguese as we aggressively go after the Brazilian market. So those are some of the additional measures, in addition to sign language, I might add, that we are focusing on, Prime Minister. So I just want to give the country a sense of where we're going, why we're doing what we're doing, and also the components that we have to implement in order for us to sustain the market, because it makes no sense us going to, using the Latin American market as an example, going to that market, but then when those guests get here, our tourists get here, we find it difficult to communicate with them. So it's an ongoing thrust, and we are going to forge ahead with that in the most fundamental way. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The last two questions, and I look forward to seeing significant progress on this language training immediately, as well as the general commitment to continue to train our workers to be the best that they can be. Barbados doesn't have the highest repeat visitor rate in the region for decades by accident, and therefore the worker component of our industry is critical as the sun, sea, and sand is the Beijing. Okay? I'd like to ask two quick questions that I think that have not been answered yet. If they have been answered, I withdraw it. And to, as I sense you're getting ready to wrap up, one, for you to update this Honourable Chamber on the plans for the BTMI to become a public-private entity, because the government is committed to that as a matter of policy. It was put on pause because of COVID for 3 years, but it has to transition if we are to ensure that this industry is capable of sustaining itself in spite of governmental and ministerial changes. It is too critical to the fundamental well-being of the nation economically for us not to vest it in the appropriate way, recognizing also the disruptions that are taking place in the marketplace with technology that has happened in the last decade, especially with how people book and the greater use of online platforms, etc. And secondly, I'd like to hear from you with respect to the plans to continue to upgrade the capacity. We don't have a lot of greenfield sites left in this country to build new hotels, but we have existing hotels that can expand. We have existing spaces for expansion. So Harrison John once said that we must be one of the few countries in the world that have the luxury of placing car parks on coastal lands where others put hotels or villas. Against that backdrop, I'd like to hear the plans for Needham's Point, generally not only with the Hilton, but also the other hotels in there that clearly need to be, that space needs to be maximized while at the same time upgraded, because it is also one of the most mature sites for the hosting of tourism entities in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. In my open remarks, I did indicate that we are going to the BTMI as part of our key objectives. 14 objectives are listed. We'll be moving to a PPP. This is necessary because we have not only to broaden the ownership base, but we also have to put the BTMI on a firm foundation going forward. I would have indicated that prior to 2018, early this morning, that the former administration didn't have the BTA, and then it came into BTMI on a sustained footing, and that when, and the Honourable Member for St. James Central would know this because he was then Minister of Tourism, that when they went to WTM, there were several questions being asked, and the first question that the airlines and operators were asked is, when will Barbados pay its debts? we were obviously in a firm position, and we, through the leadership at the time, implemented a sustained path of funding through the airport service charge for the BTMI, which allowed those questions to disappear and therefore allow us not to be embarrassed, but for persons who wanted to engage us and to do business with us. The model that when I became minister and I saw, I believe is not a model that I would advocate. What I have done, having reviewed that model, is that we have put some core elements to be incorporated in a revised document. I will be meeting with the officer assigned to us to review that plan and to share our thoughts. I've also been engaging the officers within the ministry and also the BTMI in a model that I believe will be consistent and a model that I believe will lead to sustainability. The reality is that we have to secure and to have enough revenue coming in order to fund the BTMI on a monthly basis. And we have a model that we believe can work. The other issue is that the BTMI would definitely have to invest in other ventures and projects that will have a sustained stream, not only of monthly income, but annualized income. And a number of initiatives we are seeking to conclude. We're looking, for example, to ensure that we move to the online, what we call the OTAs, the online trade facility, tour operator facility, sorry, for the business. As we all know, there is a major shift away from the operators in most markets. The BTMI's mandate must include how to drive additional business through the OTAs, and we are in discussions with an online platform. We are going to conclude those discussions in this financial year, which would allow us not only to provide a firm booking engine for OTAs, but also to have a sustained revenue position and to ensure that we benefit and sustain ourselves as much as we can. I think it's no secret that there are some hotels in Barbados who have gone this route and they have sustained upwards of 90%, and I know one in particular. Through the OTA option, as we all know, it is cheaper. Marketing, for sure, is instant, it's more effective, and it's easier to deal with. And we believe that this is but one of the opportunities that we're going to have to deal with. The other issue is that, and we all know this, that technology is driving the world. And building a database which is cleaner, which is more efficient, can help us broaden our strategic operations and help us to utilize some tactical measures to enhance visitor arrivals to Barbados. Those are some of the issues. It's also going to be an opportunity to invest for the PPP to invest in a range of investments across the island and to help build out new capacity within tourism, whilst at the same time generating income to sustain themselves. So that's on the PPP side. Regarding the capacity building, your point is noted, Prime Minister, in respect of the Needham's Point and the lands. I believe there's close to 9 acres in that area. I know that the senior minister in the Prime Minister's office has a plan to assist with the getting that site ready. Once that site is ready, there are numerous opportunities. We don't necessarily have to have one hotel on one site. Because of the acreage, we can have multiple hotels on that site, and that's a further opportunity to expand our capacity. At the Hilton, Needham's Point, we are ensuring that through the owner's returns, we continue to gain substantially what we are entitled to by way of the owner's fees and other fees that we collect from that operation. But there are also other opportunities where we can build out additional capacity. I've held the view, like you, Prime Minister, that if you want the best economic use of the land, you can't have offices and car park on the land. And I learned that when I was working in the hotel industry. And that's why we never have offices in our company, corporate offices, that is on the west coast of Barbados. The opportunity for additional growth will come when we discuss investment opportunities with aligned partners to build out what predominantly is the car park facing the current Hilton. There's no justifiable reason why that area could not have been and should be converted into additional accommodation spaces to build out what I refer to as the Hilton Peninsula. The same applies to other sites that we have around Barbados that we need to build out in order to build capacity. We need additional capacity, we need new plant, and we are very much focused, Prime Minister, in that respect. And I look forward to, once we've completed the cleanup operations at the Hilton, that we can also seek to expand the other operations and utilize a lot of the lands that we have available to further build out and grow our tourism sector.
Of course, none of this will be at the expense of locals accessing the beaches. So I think that is a given, and I just repeat it because Barbados is committed to ensuring that Bajans have full access. And I hope that one of the things that will endure to time immemorial will be that. I want to thank you, Minister. I want to thank the officials. As I said, I believe that we are operating in a very tough environment, but nevertheless, we are doing well, but we can do even better. And to that extent, the government will remain committed to ensuring that as a whole, we work step in step with you. We are aware that there are a number of new investments coming, and just as we did with the Hilton Hotel in the 1960s, where state entrepreneurship took us to a new level of tourism, we have agreed equally with the Hyatt Hotel to be able to work with them and another major private sector investor locally with the original investors to ensure that that new development and wave of tourism development in the heart of Bridgetown can start without prejudice to the other developments that would also take place there. I imagine, and I really don't want us to be talking in advance of the many things that will happen, but I am aware that you have some interesting announcements in the next few weeks and months, and I look forward, therefore, to your team putting the interests of Barbados and Barbadians at the top of growing back out a revised and renewed tourism product from the mature one that we have been managing for the last few decades. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Prime Minister. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All in favour say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 12:20 p.m. 12:25.
Before we suspend for lunch, I just want to bring some clarity. Before we break for 5 minutes, I just want to bring some clarity to the earlier proceedings. The Honourable Leader of Government Business had requested earlier the suspension of 66 subsection 1 and 67 subsection 3 of the standing orders. I just want to bring clarity that that suspension relates to the entire sitting and not just to today's sitting. The question that this honorable chairman will be suspended for 5 minutes. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended for 5 minutes.